What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. You might see a familiar car sitting on the lift right here behind me. That's right, it is the 1989 Saleen number 421, and it's back. It has gone through some of its shakedown miles, the exhaust got welded up, and well, there was an issue. It's not the end of the world, and this video is actually going to be much more informative rather than hands-on, I guess, just to give you guys a little bit of context around it. If you haven't seen the videos of me putting this car together, make sure you go back and check out the playlist on this beautiful car that has gone through a number of hands in order to come to its completion, well, near completion. And it's that number of hands that can sometimes cause a little bit of grief. And this is one of those moments. So there's really no one here to blame on what's happened. I want to make that clear right now in the beginning, because there's a couple lessons to be learned here. Number one, guys, there's always going to be hiccups, and there's always going to be something that it's like the 80-20 rule. So what happened was the car got put back together, and there was this ever so slight vibration in the drivetrain, and you could feel it between 1500 and 2500 RPM. Now, if you guys remember the exhaust that was pretty much custom made to fit on this car, which is the Hooker 3-inch Blackheart exhaust that is designed for long tube headers, and this is the Blackheart exhaust from here all the way to the back. If you guys saw the video, you would see that I cut the flanges off the long tubes, which are actually Hooker long tubes as well, but they had a flange. These guys did not, because they're designed for Coyote swap or LS swap headers. So I made them work. The owner took the car to an exhaust shop that welded everything up, and they did a fabulous job. The welds are beautiful, and everything is aligned, everything is symmetrical. Very happy with the way that that turned out. Now, while this was sort of temporarily clamped together, I noticed that one of the collectors was really close to the frame rail, and you can see it up there. Now, I assume that once everything got welded, it was going to correct that, and I thought that that was causing the vibration because it was pretty much right against that frame rail. So I've since now clearanced that, and not gonna lie, guys, big pry bar and, you know, a little bit of muscle and some grunts, and we got the clearance that we needed to get in order to keep this off the frame rail. So did the clearancing, fired the car up, still vibrating. So what's the next thing? Well, could it be maybe the clutch, right? So the car has a center force clutch, and if you guys are familiar with them, you can see right here, here's one, and center force uses these weights and, you know, this spring-loaded mechanism, which these are supposed to be self-balancing, and this actually helps give, I guess, equal pressure around all of the little forks or the teeth that the throw-up bearing puts pressure on, so that you can depress the clutch from the pressure plate. So I've heard of issues with these weights sometimes, and I went in and looked, everything looked fine, and I did what some people recommended online, and I took it out, which means I actually had to take the transmission out far enough to be able to sneak this around the input shaft of the transmission. Some of you guys are probably like, okay, well, now you've ruined the integrity of the clutch. Well, maybe yes, to a certain degree, but the reality is that clutch is rated to hold a lot more power than this motor is going to be putting down, or that the owner is going to be wanting to drive the car. The reality is, if you wanted to change the clutch out, he can do so. And it's really just one of those things where we probably reduced a little bit of the amount of power that that clutch is going to be able to handle. And yep, I did it. So I'm just going to admit to it now, because I did a lot of reading online. A lot of people were complaining, like I said. So they're like, if you have that, remove it. It got rid of my vibration, and I did that. So yes, guys, I've already removed this transmission. I've already done that. And I bolted everything back together, and guess what? Vibration is still there. So this is where you got to put your thinking cap on, and you really want to hope that, number one, you have communication or the ability to communicate with anybody that has touched part of the project that you've been working on. And secondly, you want to make sure that you didn't burn any bridges. With so many people having had their hands on this car before I got it, it'd be easy to play the blame game. It would have been easy to point fingers without knowing and making a bunch of assumptions and everything else. And I very well could have burned all my bridges. And thankfully I didn't. And that wasn't what I was trying to do regardless. But the important thing here that I want to share is the fact that I did reach out to everybody that had touched the car before. And it was almost like, you know what? I've ended up with this car. What can you tell me about it? You know, what were some of the hurdles? Why did you do this and not that? And we all have different ways of doing things. So sometimes you're going to question, why did someone do it this way when I know I'm going to do it that way? But this is why that communication is so important. Because ultimately, the transmission's got to come out again. And I don't think it needs to come out all the way. We just need to get it to where we can get access to the flywheel. So ultimately, guys, and never would have thought this, right? The car is a 331 stroker. It has a DSS bottom end, okay? And strokers, like a 331 is treated like a 347, typically when it comes to its balancing. And traditionally, or more commonly, I guess is probably the word, 347, 331 follows the 28 ounce rule of balance versus the 50 that your traditional 302 would have. So what ended up being discovered is that the engine builder who put the motor together ordered the DSS bottom end that was balanced for 0. Okay? The engine builder also purchased the harmonic balancer, which is a 0 ounce balancer, meaning there's no weights anywhere around here. This guy is a solid unit, and that is that. So the question lies, well, who installed the flywheel? Well, it wasn't the engine builder. It was somebody that was in between me and the engine builder, maybe even another shop. I can't remember now. And long story short, the individuals who had the car that installed the flywheel and the clutch, well, they went off of the traditional 28 ounce, thought process that, okay, it's a 331, we'll put a 28 ounce flywheel on there and everything will be good to go. So I called him up. I'm like, man, by any chance, do you remember putting a weight on the flywheel, or was there a weight pre-installed? Not sure which one you put on there. And he's like, yeah, I do remember installing the weight. And I'm like, okay. We now know what the problem is. Now, guys, the interesting thing about this whole process or this whole issue is that I've put or felt and seen what the wrong weighted flywheel will do in your Fox. In fact, Mr. Notorious recently suffered that with my Dutch number 5 car when he grabbed another flywheel and stuck it on the motor, and guys, it'll vibrate the teeth out of you. And this one isn't vibrating the teeth out of you. It's just it's a slight vibration that's there. It's almost like if you had solid mounts and everything, and it's just transferring, vibrations through everything else. But it's enough to be aggravating and want to try and solve the problem. So I'm thinking that the difference between 0 and 28 isn't as bad as the difference between a 28 and a 50 ounce mix up on flywheels. So needless to say, I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to come back knowing that I now need to take more apart. Before, when I was messing with the clutch, I actually took the transmission off of this QuickTime bell housing, and I had all the access that I needed to get at the weights on the clutch, and I did all that and managed to do so with the transmission, back here a little bit. Now, this time is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to have a lot more hardware to remove. starter, everything. So thankfully we have a mini starter and we should have enough clearance here. So I got to take off all of the bell housing bolts here all the way around. And then I am going to drop, well, I'm going to drop the drive shaft first and then loosen off the mount. And hopefully I can slide the bell housing back far enough. And this is a problem, right? This QuickTime plate, although the deep sump pan is would be in the way anyways guys, I need to get enough room in here to get at the flywheel and hopefully be able to take the weights off. And if I can do that, we're going to be in good shape. Otherwise, I don't know if I have to take the whole shebang off. That would really suck. So that's what I got to do, and I'm going to start doing that right now. Maybe I'll set the camera up and take a little bit of footage of me trying to tear this thing apart. And hopefully, like I said, fingers crossed, we get access to the weight on the flywheel and don't need to remove stuff off. It's just that engine plate that comes with the QuickTime bell housing, the one that goes in between the motor and the bell housing itself, that sits behind the flywheel. I'm concerned I'm not going to have enough room to get in there and get at the weight, but let's see. Let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. This plate is going to be the death of me, guys. There's going to be no way to get that plate or get at the weights with that plate in there. If this was a factory plate, it'd be so thin we'd be able to bend that. We're not going to be able to get in there. Okay guys, so the exhaust got welded all the way front to back, okay? And you can see where the X is and you can see where the tail shaft of the transmission is. So I've got the transmission up high enough. I took the shifter off. That allows the transmission to be over the X and allows us, I believe, to have enough room to do what we need to do in here, okay? And you might be wondering, well, what if you actually needed to take the transmission out? Well, if you actually need to take the transmission out, I tested that theory out yesterday. If you leave the bell housing on and you take the transmission off from the mid plate to the bell housing, there is enough room to actually sneak the transmission out. Oddly enough, because you don't have that thickness of all the clutch and everything else kind of working against you. But I think I'm going to leave this pretty much right around here. It should give us enough room to do what we have to do, which is ultimately take off the flywheel. So we will get out the clutch. We'll get all the clutch bolts out, take the clutch off, the pressure plate, and then we'll have access to the flywheel bolts. So then we'll take the flywheel bolts out and go from there, because our other limiting factor is the bell housing doesn't really want to clear the headers, right? So can't really take this out this way if I wanted to. Again, unless we took the transmission off of the mid plate, which at this point, we're pretty much committed to working in the environment that we've created for ourselves. So anyways, gonna get the clutch out, or in pressure plate, and then get at that flywheel. And the plot thickens, guys. There's no weights. It's drilled. All right, so we're back with overnight parts from Summit. We got this McLeod steel flywheel here, brand new in box. And you can see this guy actually comes with some counterweights to, those must be little dowel pins, but these weights are what we were looking for on the other flywheel that didn't have any. So if we actually flip this guy over, right, this is where we can actually put the weights on, and we will not be putting any weights on because we want a zero balance, right? So take a look at this because I'm just kind of curious, but ultimately should be able to just stick this guy in and not even worry about it. The only question that I would have is, do we run these bolts in or not? Will they have an impact? I don't know. So here we are. McLeod flywheels are zero balanced units. Many engines require zero balance flywheels, internally balanced. If your engine requires an external balance weight, the amount of external weight is easily added to the flywheel by following these steps. So we don't need to do any of this. So I don't think we don't need any screws. We don't need anything because they are zero balanced. So I'm going to jam it in as is, and hopefully our problem will be solved. All right, guys, moment of truth. Everything is back together. I did not think I'd be able to jam everything back in, get it all buttoned up this afternoon, but I did. So I'm gonna put the car down, we're gonna start it up, and fingers crossed, no more vibration. All right, the car is down. I'm not even gonna open up a bay door because we're gonna know right away, and regardless of what happens, I'm going home. So let's see. She's cold. Oh yes. Yes, success. I am going home. It is Friday afternoon. I am going to drink 5 beers, maybe even more. Anyways, guys, this is what it's all about. You get super frustrated, but patience, relax, take a step back, and talk to other people. Sometimes, like, if I hadn't reached out to the machine shop and to the previous guys that had this car, I would have just been banging my head against the wall, wondering what the hell is wrong with this car. But we managed to get it figured out. There's a nice mess here to clean up. I am leaving it. I don't even care, right? Reward time, going home, cooking a steak, drinking beer. Stick around till next time on the Infamous Project. As always, thank you again for your support.